The fluorescent lights of Seoul National Maternity Hospital flickered once, then steadied as if the building itself braced for what was coming. 3 doctors abandoned their rounds mid-sentence. Nurses froze in the corridor, clipboards forgotten against their chests. Outside, the screech of tires shattered the morning calm as 4 armored black SUVs surrounded the hospital entrance in precise formation, their engines still running. Armed men in dark suits poured out, securing every door. The feared Korean Mafia boss had arrived. Inside examination room 7, a Nigerian woman gripped the edge of the hospital bed, her knuckles pale against her rich dark brown skin. The ultrasound monitor glowed in the dim room. Complete silence. The chief doctor's hand trembled against the probe. He turned slowly toward the couple, his voice barely a whisper. "I've delivered babies for 32 years. I've never seen anything like this." He pointed at the monitor. 5 tiny heartbeats pulsed on the screen. The room froze. Jin Hae-ryong, supreme leader of the Dragon Crest Syndicate, the man feared by an entire criminal empire spanning 3 continents, stood motionless. His steel-gray eyes widened. For the first time in his life, the Dragon of Seoul looked terrified. How could this happen only weeks after discovering the pregnancy? Please like, share and subscribe. Also comment below where you're watching from so I can see just how far across the world this story has traveled. 6 weeks earlier, the streets of Gangnam glistened under autumn rain. It was the kind of rain that made Seoul look like a painting, soft, silver, relentless. The neon signs of luxury boutiques reflected off wet asphalt, and the few pedestrians who braved the downpour moved quickly beneath their umbrellas, heads down, minding their own business. Nobody looked twice at the convoy of 3 black Mercedes sedans that glided through the district like shadows. Nobody dared. In the back seat of the middle car sat Jin Hae-ryong. He was 38 years old, though people who knew only his reputation imagined someone older, someone weathered by violence and cruelty. Instead, the man behind the tinted glass was striking. He stood 6 feet 3 inches tall when upright, with a lean, muscular frame that his tailored black suit barely concealed. His jet-black hair was slicked back with military precision, revealing the sharp angles of his jaw and cheekbones. A light stubble darkened his chin, adding a rugged edge to what might otherwise have been an aristocratic face. But it was his eyes that people remembered. Steel gray. The kind of eyes that looked through a person rather than at them, calculating value, threat, and usefulness in a single glance. A traditional black and gray Korean dragon tattoo began just behind his right ear, its serpentine body flowing diagonally down his neck toward his collarbone, winding through soft wisps of smoke shading that dissolved into his skin just above his shirt collar. The dragon represented leadership, resilience, protection, and the crushing burden of legacy, everything he had inherited from his father and his father's father before him. Both arms, hidden now beneath the sleeves of his impeccably tailored jacket, were covered in black and gray realism sleeve tattoos. A fierce Korean tiger mid-roar, ancient mountain landscapes shrouded in mist, traditional Korean calligraphy quoting warrior proverbs, and prayer beads that wrapped around his forearms like spiritual armor. On his knuckles, inked in clean black capital letters, were 2 words. Right hand, loyalty. Left hand, honor. They were not decorations. They were commandments. The codes by which he ruled, punished, and on rare occasion showed mercy. He sat in silence, a crystal glass of untouched whiskey resting in the cup holder beside him. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. A message from Kang Suk-min, his most trusted lieutenant and right-hand man for the past 12 years. Asterisk warehouse situation handled. Pling. No traces. Asterisk. Jean typed a single word back. Good. He slipped the phone into his breast pocket and stared out the rain-streaked window. The city passed by in wet blurs of light and color. He owned more of it than most people realized. Legitimate businesses, hotels, construction firms, shipping companies, a chain of private hospitals, formed the gleaming surface of his empire. Beneath that surface lay the Dragon Crest Syndicate, a criminal organization that controlled weapons distribution, underground gambling networks, and protection operations across South Korea, Japan, and Southeast Asia. Jin Hae-ryong had inherited the syndicate at 23 when his father was assassinated during a peace negotiation that turned out to be an ambush. In 15 years he had tripled the syndicate's power and eliminated every rival who had been involved in his father's murder. Every single one. The last one had taken 9 years to find. Jean had handled that one personally. The Dragon of Seoul. That was what they called him. Not to his face. Never to his face. But the name followed him through every back alley, every boardroom, every whispered conversation between men who thought they were powerful until they encountered someone who truly was. His driver spoke without turning his head. "Sir, we're approaching the Hanul Medical Center." 4 minutes. Jean nodded once. Tonight was not about business. Not exactly. The Hanul Medical Center was one of his legitimate holdings. A state-of-the-art private hospital in the heart of Gangnam that served politicians, celebrities and the ultra-wealthy. A fundraising gala was being held in its grand atrium to celebrate the opening of a new neonatal wing. Jean was expected to attend as the hospital's primary investor. He despised these events. The forced smiles. The hollow congratulations from people who feared him too much to be genuine but needed his money too badly to stay away. But tonight something would happen that no amount of strategic planning could have predicted. Tonight he would meet her. The atrium of the Hanul Medical Center had been transformed. Crystal chandeliers cast warm golden light across tables draped in white linen. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Waiters in black vests circulated with champagne flutes and delicate hors d'oeuvres on silver trays. Seoul's elite mingled in clusters. Surgeons in expensive suits, hospital board members, socialites, politicians. The air smelled of lilies and old money. Jean arrived through a private entrance, flanked by 2 members of his security detail. He wore a long black overcoat over his suit, and his Italian leather shoes clicked against the marble floor with quiet authority. Heads turned. Conversations paused. A ripple of awareness moved through the room the way it always did when he entered a space. People instinctively stepped aside not because he demanded it, but because something primal in them recognized a predator. He shook the hand of the hospital director, exchanged precisely 12 words of pleasantry, then moved to the edge of the room where a glass of sparkling water was already waiting for him. He never drank at public events. Control, always control. And that was when he saw her. She was standing near the entrance to the neonatal wing, speaking with a group of nurses who were clearly off duty for the evening but still lingering near their territory. She wore a fitted emerald green dress that fell just below her knees, elegant and understated, with small gold earrings that caught the light when she turned her head. Her skin was a rich, luminous dark brown that seemed to glow under the chandeliers. Long natural black curls cascaded past her shoulders, framing a face of extraordinary warmth, high cheekbones, full lips and eyes the color of warm amber, the kind of brown that had flecks of gold when the light hit them just right. She was 5'8" with an elegant, curvy figure and a posture so graceful it looked effortless. She was laughing at something one of the nurses said, and the sound of her laughter cut through the ambient noise of the gala like sunlight through clouds. Jean Hae-ryong, who had stared down assassins without blinking, who had negotiated with Yakuza bosses over loaded weapons pointed at his chest, who had buried his own father with dry eyes because he could not afford to show weakness, that man felt something shift inside his ribcage. It was subtle. A crack in the ice. The faintest tremor in a foundation he had spent a lifetime reinforcing. He looked away. Then looked back. He was still laughing. "Who is she?" he asked, his voice low. Kang Suk-min appeared at his side like a shadow. He was a stocky man of 42, with a shaved head and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He had a scar that ran from his left temple to the corner of his mouth, a souvenir from the night they had avenged Jin's father. Suk-min followed his boss's gaze, then pulled out his phone and tapped quietly for 30 seconds. "Alachukun Wafer," Suk-min said, reading from his screen. 28 years old. Nigerian national. Obstetric nurse. She transferred here 4 months ago from a hospital in Lagos through an international medical exchange program. She's assigned to the neonatal intensive care unit. Clean record. No criminal associations. No family in Korea. One close friend, another Nigerian nurse named Amaka Ude who works at a hospital in Itaewon. Jean said nothing for a long moment. His steel-gray eyes remained fixed on the woman across the room. "She's smiling like she belongs here," he said quietly. Suk-min glanced at his boss with a flicker of surprise. In 12 years he had never once heard Jean Hae-ryong comment on a woman's smile. "Should I arrange an introduction, sir?" Jean straightened his cuffs. The edge of his sleeve tattoo disappeared beneath his jacket cuff. "No. I'll do it myself. Sukmin's eyebrows rose a millimeter. Another first. Jean moved through the crowd with the unhurried confidence of a man who owned the building, because he did. People parted for him without being asked. He stopped 4 feet from where Alachuku stood. The nurses she had been speaking with noticed him first. Their faces changed. One of them went visibly pale. They murmured quick excuses and scattered like birds from a hawk's shadow. Alachuku turned, and for the first time her amber-brown eyes met his steel-gray ones. She didn't flinch. She didn't step back. She didn't look away. Instead she tilted her head slightly, the way someone does when they encounter something unexpected but not unwelcome. "You just frightened away my entire conversation," she said. Her voice was warm, with the musical lilt of a Nigerian accent softened by years of speaking English in professional settings. There was no trace of fear in it. No deference. Just honest observation with a hint of amusement. Jean felt the crack in his ice widen. "I apologize," he said. "That wasn't my intention." "Wasn't it?" The corner of her lips twitched. She was teasing him. This woman, who surely must have heard whispers about who he was the moment she walked into this gala, was teasing him. "I'm Jean Hyryong," he said. "I know who you are." She extended her hand. "Alachukun Wafer. I work in the NICU upstairs. I'm told you funded most of it." He took her hand. Her grip was firm but gentle. Her skin was impossibly soft against his calloused palm, and he became suddenly aware of the word loyalty inked across the knuckles that now held her fingers. "The neonatal wing is important work," he said, releasing her hand a beat later than necessary. "It is," she agreed. "Though I suspect you didn't build it because you're passionate about neonatal care." "You suspect correctly." "Tax benefits? Public image?" Her eyebrows rose. "Most people in your position would have lied and said it was about the children." "I don't lie," he said. Then after a pause, "Not about things that don't matter." She studied him. Not the way people usually studied him, scanning for threat, for weakness, for advantage. She looked at him the way she might look at a patient's chart, searching for the story beneath the numbers. "That's either very honest or very arrogant," she said. "Probably both." And then she laughed. That same laugh. The one that had reached him across a crowded room full of Seoul's most powerful people. This time, standing only feet away, it moved through him like warm water over stone. They talked for 47 minutes. He learned that she had grown up in Enugu in southeastern Nigeria. That her mother was a midwife who had delivered over 3,000 babies in a career spanning 4 decades. That her father had been a secondary school principal who died of a heart attack when she was 19. That she had put herself through nursing school on a partial scholarship and sheer determination. That she had chosen obstetric nursing because she believed the first hands to touch a newborn child should be hands guided by love, not just training. She learned almost nothing about him. Not because he deflected, though he was a master of deflection, but because she didn't push. She seemed to understand instinctively that the man standing before her had layers that could not be peeled back over champagne and string quartets. She asked him about the hospital, about his vision for the neonatal wing, about whether he'd ever held a newborn baby. "No," he said. "Never. You should. It changes something in you. Something permanent." He looked at her for a long moment. "Maybe." At the end of the evening she excused herself to rejoin her colleagues. She did not ask for his number. She did not linger. She did not look back over her shoulder as she walked away. And that, more than anything, was what undid him. Because in Jean Hyryong's world, everyone wanted something from him. Everyone lingered. Everyone looked back. Everyone calculated. This woman had simply enjoyed his company and then walked away, complete in herself, needing nothing he could offer. He stood alone by the window watching the rain fall on Seoul, and realized he could still smell her perfume. Something warm. Something like shea butter and jasmine. Sukmin appeared at his elbow. "The car is ready, sir." Jean didn't move. "Find out her schedule. I want to know when she works, when she's off duty, where she lives. Everything." Sukmin hesitated. "Sir, with respect, she's a civilian. If the syndicate's enemies discover you have an interest in a woman with no protection, no connections, then we'll make sure they don't discover it. And if they do?" Jean turned his steel-gray eyes on his lieutenant. The look was calm, quiet, and absolutely lethal. "Then God help them." Over the following 3 weeks, Jin Hae-ryong did something he had never done in his adult life. He pursued someone. Not with the overwhelming force he applied to business negotiations. Not with the strategic precision he used against rivals. He pursued Ala Chukun-wafer with something far more dangerous. Patience. He showed up at the hospital twice under the guise of investor inspections. Both times he found reasons to visit the neonatal wing. Both times he found her there, competent, focused, gentle with the tiny patients in her care. He watched her hold a premature infant against her chest, humming a Nigerian lullaby so softly that only the baby and the monitors could hear it. And he felt something inside him rearrange itself, something fundamental shifting like tectonic plates beneath the city. The third time he abandoned all pretense. He was waiting outside the staff entrance at 7 in the morning when her shift ended. Leaning against a black sedan. Alone. No bodyguards in sight, though Sukmin was positioned in an unmarked car 30 meters away, watching through binoculars and questioning every life decision that had led him to babysit his boss's love life. Ala Chukwu walked out, pulling a light jacket over her nursing uniform. She stopped when she saw him. Her amber-brown eyes narrowed slightly. Mr. Jean. Ms. Nwafer. Are you inspecting the parking lot now? I was hoping you'd have breakfast with me. She stared at him. It's 7 in the morning. I've been awake for 13 hours. I smell like antiseptic and baby formula. I know a place that serves the best kimchi jjigae in Seoul. It's quiet. No one will bother us. Are you asking me on a date? I'm asking you to eat. She studied him again with those warm, impossibly perceptive eyes. You don't seem like the kind of man who waits outside hospitals for nurses. I'm not. Something passed between them. A current. An understanding that whatever was happening had already moved beyond the territory of casual acquaintance, and that neither of them was quite sure what to do about it. One meal, she said. He opened the car door for her. The restaurant was a small, family-run place in a quiet alley near Buckshin. No signage. No menu. The elderly woman who ran it simply brought out whatever she had prepared that morning. She glanced at Jean with the kind of familiarity that suggested he had been coming here since childhood. She glanced at Ala Chukwu with the kind of surprise that suggested he had never brought anyone with him. They sat across from each other at a low wooden table. Steam rose from the jjigae between them. Ala Chukwu picked up her chopsticks with practiced ease that made Jean raise an eyebrow. 4 months in Seoul, she said, catching his look. A girl adapts. He almost smiled. Almost. They talked. Truly talked. Not the careful, curated conversation of the gala but something rawer. She told him about the loneliness of being a foreigner in a country that was beautiful but often cold to outsiders. About the patients she had lost and the ones she had saved. About her mother back in Enugu who called her every Sunday and asked when she was coming home to find a husband. And what do you tell her? Jean asked. I tell her I'm busy saving lives and she should save her prayers for someone who needs them. Does she listen? She's a Nigerian mother. She prays twice as hard out of spite. This time Jean did smile. It was small. Brief. A crack of light in a granite wall. But Ala Chukwu saw it and something in her expression softened. You should do that more often, she said quietly. Do what? Smile. It makes you look human. The words landed in a place he had kept locked for years. He drove her home afterward. She lived in a modest apartment in Yongsun-gu, a neighborhood that was respectable but far from luxurious. He walked her to the building entrance. She turned to face him, her natural black curls catching the morning breeze. Thank you for breakfast, she said. Thank you for saying yes. She hesitated. Then, Jin Hae-ryong, I don't know exactly what you do beyond hospitals and investments. But I hear things. People talk. And the things they say are. She trailed off. Frightening. Complicated. He held her gaze. If I told you that the things people say are true, would you still have breakfast with me? She was quiet for a long time. The morning traffic hummed in the distance. A bird sang from the rooftop of her building. I think, she said carefully, that people are more than the worst things said about them. But I also think a woman should walk into a room with her eyes open. And are your eyes open? Wide open, Mr. Jean. She went inside. The door closed. Jean stood on the sidewalk for a full minute before returning to his car. Sukmin was waiting, having repositioned from his surveillance vehicle. He said nothing, but his expression asked 1,000 questions. Not a word, Jean said as he slid into the back seat. Sukman's lips pressed together. He started the engine. After 3 blocks of silence he couldn't resist. She seems nice, sir. I said not a word. That was 3 words, sir. I'm under quota. Jin's jaw tightened, but Sukman caught the barely perceptible twitch at the corner of his boss's mouth. In 12 years of service, it was the closest thing to a second smile he had ever witnessed in a single morning. Something was changing. Something seismic. The breakfasts became a pattern. Every 3 or 4 days, whenever her shift schedule allowed, Jean would appear. Sometimes at the hospital. Sometimes at her apartment. Always alone, or as alone as a man with invisible bodyguards could be. He brought her to hidden restaurants, quiet parks, a private rooftop garden overlooking the Han River where the city lights spread out like a blanket of earthbound stars. They never ran out of things to say. She challenged him in ways no one else dared. When he made a dismissive comment about weakness, she told him that vulnerability required more strength than aggression and that any fool could build a wall but only the brave could open a door. When he described his view of the world as a chessboard, she told him that real life wasn't chess because chess didn't account for love, and love was the only force that had ever changed anything permanently. You sound like a philosopher, he said. I sound like a woman who has held dying infants in her arms and seen what love can do when medicine fails. He went quiet. She was unlike anyone in his world. The women who orbited the syndicate were either afraid of him or attracted to his power. Alachukwu was neither. She saw the power and was unimpressed. She sensed the danger and was unafraid. She looked at him and saw something he had stopped looking for in himself years ago. A man. Not a boss. Not a dragon. Just a man. It happened on a night when the autumn air had turned cold enough to see their breath. They were walking along the Cheonggyecheon stream, the water lit by soft blue lights embedded in the stone banks. She was wearing a camel-colored wool coat over a simple cream dress. Her curls were pulled to one side. She was telling him about a set of twins she had helped deliver that afternoon. Both healthy, both screaming, the mother crying from joy. She kept saying, my miracles, Alachukwu recounted, her eyes glistening. And I thought, this is it. This is why I do this work. Not the science. Not the medicine. This moment when a mother sees her children for the first time and the whole world becomes brand new. Jean stopped walking. She turned to look at him, confused by the sudden halt. He reached for her hand. Fully. Giving her time to pull away. He didn't. His fingers, marked with loyalty and honor, intertwined with hers. Alachukwu. Yes. I have done things that would horrify you. I have built an empire on fear. I have made decisions that cost people their lives. I am not a good man by any definition you would recognize. She didn't speak. She listened. But when I am with you, he continued, his voice low, rough, stripped of the authority he wore like armor, I want to be better than what I am. And I have never wanted that before. Not once. Not for anyone. The stream murmured beside them. The city breathed around them. Alachukwu lifted her free hand and placed it against his chest, directly over his heart. I can't fix you, she said softly. I won't try. But I can stand beside you while you fix yourself. If you're willing. And if the things I've done are unforgivable, then you spend the rest of your life doing things that are. That's how it works, Jean. You don't erase the past. You outgrow it. He pulled her closer. Not with force. With gravity. Like a planet drawing a moon into its orbit through nothing but the quiet, undeniable truth of mass and proximity. He pressed his forehead against hers. Their breath mingled in the cold air. Stay with me, he whispered. I'm here, she whispered back. He kissed her. Gently. Reverently. As if she were something sacred and he were a man who had forgotten how to pray but was learning again, word by word, touch by touch. When they finally separated, her amber-brown eyes were wet. His steel-gray eyes were clear for the first time in years. That night they chose each other. Not with grand declarations. Not with promises they couldn't keep. With something quieter, something more honest. The decision to try. And what followed that decision? The nights spent together, the closeness, the intimacy that unfolded naturally between two adults who had opened themselves to each other fully, was something neither of them could have predicted the consequences of. Something miraculous. Something terrifying. Something that would change everything. 3 weeks later, Alachukwu fainted at work. It happened in the NICU during a routine feeding cycle. One moment she was adjusting the nasal cannula on a premature infant. The next, the room tilted violently sideways. The edges of her vision went white and she collapsed against the side of the incubator. A colleague caught her before she hit the floor. When she came to, she was sitting in the break room with a cup of water and Dr. Park Jun standing over her with a clinical frown. Dr. Park was 51 years old, widely regarded as Korea's leading maternal-fetal medicine specialist, and the kind of doctor who could deliver bad news with such calm professionalism that patients often thanked her before they realized they should be crying. She had steel-gray hair cut in a sharp bob, wire-rimmed glasses, and the hands of a surgeon who had brought thousands of lives safely into the world. "How long have you been nauseous?" Dr. Park asked. "A few days. Maybe a week. I assumed it was the cafeteria food." "And the fatigue?" "I work 12-hour shifts." Dr. Park's frown deepened. "When was your last menstrual period?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Alachukwu opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. I'm not sure. I've been so busy that Alachukwu. Maybe 6 weeks. 7. Dr. Park said nothing. She simply handed over a pregnancy test. 12 minutes later, Alachukwu sat alone in a bathroom stall, staring at 2 bright pink lines on a plastic stick, and felt the entire architecture of her carefully constructed life shift beneath her feet. She was pregnant. She was pregnant by the most dangerous man in South Korea. Her hands trembled. Her vision blurred. A sound escaped her lips, half laugh, half sob, that echoed off the tile walls. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jean. * Dinner tonight? I found a place that serves Nigerian food. The chef is from Calabar. *. She stared at the message through tears. The pregnancy test felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in her hand. She knew she had to tell him. He just didn't know how. She didn't know how to tell a man who controlled a criminal empire that she was carrying his child. She didn't know how he would react. She didn't know if this would put her in more danger or less. She didn't know if the feared dragon of Seoul had any room in his armored heart for something as small and fragile as a baby. She typed back with shaking fingers. Yes. I need to talk to you. His response was immediate. Is everything okay? She almost laughed. Nothing was okay. Everything was terrifying. Everything was uncertain. Everything was about to change. I'll tell you tonight. She set the phone down, placed both hands on her stomach and closed her eyes. I don't know what's going to happen, she whispered to the life growing inside her. But I promise you this, whatever happens, you are wanted. You are already loved. A tear slid down her cheek and fell onto the front of her nursing uniform, forming a small dark circle right over her heart. The restaurant was intimate, tucked into a basement level on a quiet street in Mapogu. The chef, a broad-shouldered man from Cross River State, came out personally to greet them, his eyes widening when he recognized Jean but recovering with professional grace. The aroma of jollof rice, pepper soup and fried plantains filled the small space, and for a moment, Alachukwu was transported back to her mother's kitchen in Enugu, where love was measured in spoonfuls and family was everything. Jean noticed something was different the moment he saw her. She was wearing a burgundy wrap dress with gold accents, her natural curls loose around her shoulders. Beautiful as always. But her eyes were different. There was a storm behind the amber. Her smile, when she offered it, didn't reach its usual depth. He pulled her chair out for her. He ordered palm wine for her and sparkling water for himself. He waited. He tried to eat. She managed 3 bites of jollof rice before setting her fork down. Jean. Tell me. His voice was steady. His steel-gray eyes were locked onto hers with an intensity that most people found terrifying. But she had never been most people. I'm pregnant. The words fell between them like stones dropped from a great height. Jean Haryong did not move. He did not speak. He did not blink. For 7 full seconds, she counted them in heartbeats. The most feared man in the Korean underworld sat perfectly still, as if someone had pressed pause on reality itself. Then something happened that she had never seen before. His eyes changed. Not their color. Not their shape. But the quality of the light behind them. It was as if a door that had been sealed with iron and concrete and years of discipline cracked open, just a fraction, and something raw and uncontrolled spilled through. How far along? His voice was barely audible. 6 weeks. Maybe 7. I saw Dr. Park today. She confirmed it. Are you? He stopped. Started again. Are you all right? Medically. Are you healthy? So far, yes. And He couldn't seem to say the word. This man who gave orders that toppled businesses, who spoke sentences that sealed fates, couldn't form the word. The baby, she said gently, finishing for him. The baby is fine. As far as we know. He looked down at his hands. The loyalty and honor on his knuckles stared back at him. For years, those words had guided him through a world of blood and power. Now they seemed to pulse with new meaning. I need you to know something, Olachuku said, and her voice carried the quiet steel that he had come to recognize as her deepest strength. I'm keeping this baby. That's not a discussion. That's not a negotiation. I didn't plan this, and I know the timing is impossible, and I know who you are and what your world looks like. But this child is mine, and I will raise it with or without. Stop. The word came out rough. Almost broken. She stopped. He reached across the table and took both her hands in his. His calloused fingers enveloped hers completely. She could feel the heat of him, the controlled tremor in his grip. Olachuku, he said, and her name in his mouth sounded like something between a prayer and an oath. I have never run from anything in my life. Not bullets. Not betrayal. Not death. He squeezed her hands. I will not run from this. What are you saying? I'm saying that whatever this child needs, whatever you need, I will provide it. Protect it. Fight for it. He paused. I don't know how to be a father. I don't know if I'm capable of the kind of goodness that a child deserves. But I know this. No one on this earth will harm you or this baby as long as I'm breathing. Tears spilled down her cheeks, tracking silver lines against her rich dark brown skin. You're crying, he said. These are hormonal tears. Don't flatter yourself. He almost smiled again. That small, rare fracture of light. We need to keep this quiet, he said, shifting into the strategic mode that was second nature to him. At least for now. The syndicate. My enemies. If they learn about this before I've secured proper protection. I understand. I'll arrange private security for you immediately. Around the clock. You won't see them, but they'll be there. Jean, I don't need bodyguards. This isn't optional. His tone hardened. Not toward her, but toward the world that would threaten her. You don't know what people are capable of. The men who want to destroy me would use anything, anyone, to do it. Especially someone He caught himself. Someone you what? She asked softly. He held her gaze. The restaurant hummed quietly around them. The scent of pepper soup hung in the air like a benediction. Someone I'm not willing to lose. 4 weeks after the pregnancy was confirmed, Dr. Park Ji-eun called Olachuku in for a routine first trimester ultrasound. It was supposed to be standard. Confirmation of viability. Estimation of gestational age. A quick look at the tiny heartbeat that had already rearranged the lives of 2 very different people from 2 very different worlds. Jean insisted on being there. He arrived at the hospital in a convoy that could have escorted a head of state. 4 armored black SUVs surrounded the building. 8 members of his personal security detail took positions at every entrance, exit, and stairwell. Sukmin coordinated the operation from a mobile command post in the parking garage, monitoring security feeds with the intensity of a general directing a military campaign. All of this for an ultrasound appointment. This is excessive, Olachuku said as Jean walked into the private examination suite on the hospital's top floor, a floor that had been cleared of all other patients for the duration of their visit. This is necessary. You cleared an entire floor. I cleared 2 floors. The one above us is also empty. Sniper sight lines. She stared at him. Did you just say sniper sight lines? For an ultrasound. Precaution. She sat on the edge of the hospital bed, her long curls pulled back in a low bun, wearing a soft gray medical gown. She looked small in the large room surrounded by humming machines and sterile surfaces. But her eyes, those warm amber-brown eyes, held a quiet courage that made the room feel less clinical and more human. Jean stood beside her, ramrod straight, hands clasped behind his back. He looked like he was preparing for a business negotiation or a war council. His jaw was tight. His steel-gray eyes scanned the room as if expecting threats to materialize from the medical equipment. Dr. Park entered, composed and professional as always. She acknowledged Jean with a respectful nod that carried precisely zero intimidation, which Alachukwu appreciated. Dr. Park was the kind of woman who would have maintained the same level of professional composure if a tornado walked into her office. "Shall we begin?" Dr. Park said, applying the ultrasound gel. The probe touched Alachukwu's abdomen. The screen flickered to life. Black and white shapes swirled like storms in miniature. Dr. Park moved the probe slowly. Her eyes, magnified behind her wire-rimmed glasses, were fixed on the monitor with the focused attention of someone reading a map in an unfamiliar landscape. She frowned. She moved the probe again. Frowned deeper. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Is something wrong?" Alachukwu asked, her hand instinctively reaching for Jin's. He took it. His grip was iron. Dr. Park didn't answer immediately. She adjusted the angle of the probe, zoomed in, zoomed out, then sat back in her chair and removed her glasses. She polished them slowly with a cloth, put them back on and looked at the screen again. "Dr. Park," Jean said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Speak." The doctor took a breath. When she turned to face them, her expression was a complex mixture of astonishment, professional caution, and something that looked remarkably like awe. "I've delivered babies for 32 years, she said. "I've never seen anything like this." She turned the monitor to face them and pointed. "Here." Her finger traced a shape on the screen. "And here. And here." She moved again. "Here. And here." 5 tiny forms. 5 distinct shapes. Each no bigger than a grape, each pulsing with its own rhythmic heartbeat. "You are carrying quintuplets," Dr. Park said. 3 boys and 2 girls based on what I can see at this stage. All 5 appear viable. All 5 heartbeats are strong." The room went completely silent. Alachukwu's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes went wide, then wider, until the amber seemed to swallow the white entirely. Tears erupted without warning, streaming down her face in rivers that caught the blue light of the monitor. 5, she whispered through her fingers. 5. Spontaneous quintuplets, Dr. Park confirmed. Without fertility treatment, the odds of this occurring naturally are approximately 1 in 60 million births. This is... He paused, searching for the right word. Extraordinary. Jean Haeryong had not moved. Had not spoken. Had not breathed. He stood beside the bed like a statue carved from stone, his steel-gray eyes locked on the monitor where 5 tiny heartbeats pulsed in unison. The loyalty across his right knuckles whitened as his grip on Alachukwu's hand tightened. 5 children. 5 lives that would carry his blood and her blood, his darkness and her light, his sins and her grace. 5 reasons for every enemy he had ever made to target the woman lying on this hospital bed. 5 reasons for the dragon of Seoul to burn the entire world to the ground if anyone so much as breathed in their direction. His chest expanded with a breath so deep it seemed to draw air from the foundations of the building. When he exhaled, his voice came out in a sound that was barely human, low, raw, trembling at the edges in a way that no member of his syndicate had ever witnessed and lived to describe. 5, he said. Just the one word. But in that single syllable was everything. Terror, wonder, love, fury, protection, and the seismic realization that the life he had known was over and something new, something infinitely more dangerous and infinitely more beautiful had begun. Dr. Park allowed them a moment. Then, with the gentle firmness of a doctor who understood that all must eventually give way to reality, she continued. This pregnancy will be high risk from the very beginning. Quintuplets put extraordinary demands on the mother's body. We'll need to monitor you weekly. Bed rest will likely become necessary in the 2nd trimester. The risks include preterm labor, preeclampsia, gestational diabetes and... Whatever she needs, Jean cut in. His voice had regained its steel. Whatever resources, whatever specialists, whatever equipment. Money is not a factor. I will fly in experts from anywhere in the world. I will build a medical facility dedicated to this pregnancy if necessary. Tell me what is required and it will be done within 24 hours. Dr. Park studied him over the rim of her glasses. Mr. Jean, the most important thing this pregnancy requires is not money. It's peace. Stress is the greatest enemy of a high-risk pregnancy. Whatever your professional life involves, I would strongly advise that the mother be shielded from its pressures. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Jin's jaw tightened. He understood perfectly. The doctor was telling him in the most diplomatically devastating way possible that his entire existence was a threat to his unborn children. He looked down at Alachukwu. She looked up at him. Between them 5 hearts beat. I understand, he said quietly. But understanding and executing were 2 very different things, especially when an empire of shadows depended on the very violence that Dr. Park was telling him to keep at bay. The news traveled faster than he wanted it to. Within 48 hours, Sukmin informed him that rumors were circulating within the syndicate. Not about the quintuplets specifically, that detail was still contained, but about Jin's sudden and uncharacteristic preoccupation with a woman. A foreign woman. A woman who had no family connections, no political value, no strategic significance. The whispers were dangerous. In the world of the Dragon Crest Syndicate, personal attachments were liabilities. Jin's own father had been murdered because his enemies discovered that he visited his mistress every Thursday at the same address. Patterns. Vulnerabilities. Points of pressure. And now Jin Hae-ryong, who had spent 15 years being invulnerable, had created not 1 but 6 points of pressure. A woman and 5 unborn children. He called an emergency meeting of his inner circle. 12 men gathered in the underground conference room beneath his Gangnam penthouse. A windowless space lined with soundproofing and electronic countermeasures that could defeat any listening device known to exist. They sat around a black marble table. Jin stood at the head, his long black overcoat draped over the back of his chair. The edge of his neck tattoo was visible above his open collar, the dragon's body seeming to writhe in the fluorescent light. There will be changes, he said. No preamble. No softening. Effective immediately, Kang Sukmin will assume operational command of all field activities. Distribution, collections, negotiations. Everything goes through him. I will retain strategic oversight, but my physical involvement in daily operations will be reduced. Silence. Heavy charged silence. 12 men stared at their supreme leader as if he had just spoken in a language they didn't understand. One man cleared his throat. Yoon Tae-wook, the syndicate's financial controller, a lean, nervous man whose value lay in his ability to make billions disappear and reappear in untraceable accounts. May I ask why, sir? No. Another silence. Sir, said another voice, Park Jae-ho, the head of the syndicate's enforcement division, a man whose neck was thicker than most people's thighs. The Cha organization has been testing our borders in Busan. If they perceive any withdrawal of your direct authority, they could interpret it as weakness. Cha Dong-hwan. The name landed on the table like a blade. Cha Dong-hwan was the leader of the Black Serpent organization, the only rival syndicate that still dared to challenge the Dragon Crest's dominance. He was 45, calculating, patient, and utterly ruthless. Where Jin led through a combination of fear and strategic brilliance, Cha operated through pure cruelty. He had once sent a rival's wife her husband's finger, wrapped in their wedding invitation as a negotiation tactic. Jin had been at war with Cha for years. Not open war, not yet. But a cold war of territory, influence and information that both sides knew would eventually erupt into something bloodier. Cha Dong-hwan will interpret whatever I want him to interpret, Jin said. That's my concern, not yours. Your concern is to execute the transition flawlessly. Sukmin has my full authority. Any questions? There were none. Not because the men didn't have questions, but because they had learned long ago that questioning Jin Hae-ryong after he used that particular tone was an excellent way to shorten one's life expectancy. The meeting ended. The men filed out. Sukmin remained. They're worried, Sukmin said. They should be. Change is dangerous. They're not worried about the change. They're worried about you. Jin looked at his oldest friend. I'm fine. You're pulling back from the syndicate to protect a woman who most of them don't even know exists. When they find out why. Sukmin paused, choosing his words with the care of a man defusing a bomb. 5 children, Jin. The Dragon of Seoul having 5 children with a foreigner. It's going to send shockwaves. Through our organization. Through Cha's. Through every allied and opposing force in the Asian underworld. I know. And you're doing it anyway. Jin walked to the window. The Seoul skyline glittered beneath them like a circuit board, millions of lights representing millions of lives that moved and breathed and dreamed without any knowledge of the invisible wars being fought above their heads. When I was 23, he said quietly, I held my father's body in a warehouse in Incheon. He was still warm. His blood was on my shirt. And I made a vow that I would never have a weakness that could be exploited. No wife. No children. No love. Nothing that anyone could take from me. He turned from the window. His steel-gray eyes held something that Sukmin had never seen in them before. I kept that vow for 15 years. And then a woman from Enugu laughed in a room full of people who feared me, and I realized that the absence of weakness wasn't strength. It was just emptiness wearing a mask. He paused. Those 5 children are coming into this world whether I'm ready or not. And I will not let them enter a world where their father is absent or indifferent, or too consumed by power to hold them. Sukmin studied his boss for a long moment. Then he straightened, squared his shoulders and bowed his head slightly. Then I'll protect them as if they were my own. I know you will. That's why you're the only person I trust. Sukmin left the room. In the silence that followed, Jean placed his hand flat against the cold glass of the window. 5 heartbeats. 5 tiny lights in the darkness. For the first time in his life, Jean Hyeryong was afraid. Not of enemies. Not of death. Not of the empires that would align against him when the truth emerged. He was afraid of failing them. And that fear paradoxically made him more dangerous than he had ever been. Because a man with nothing to lose fights recklessly. But a man with everything to lose fights without mercy. Alachukwu told Amaka on a Tuesday afternoon. Amaka Ude was Alachukwu's closest friend. A Nigerian nurse from Abia State who worked at a hospital in Idiwan and possessed a personality that could best be described as a hurricane wearing lipstick. She was 30 years old, 5 feet 4, built like a woman who had never met a plate of pounded yam she didn't finish, and blessed with a voice that could carry across 3 city blocks without losing any of its considerable authority. They met at a cafe in Hongdae. Alachukwu ordered ginger tea. Amaka ordered a double espresso and a slice of cheesecake. So, Amaka said, stirring her coffee with the intensity of a woman preparing for war. You said you had something to tell me. You've been avoiding my calls for 2 weeks. You missed Chinyu's video call from London. And you look like you've either just received the best news of your life or the worst. Speak. Alachukwu took a breath. I'm pregnant. Amaka's spoon stopped mid-stir. Her eyes widened. Then widened further. Then achieved a diameter that seemed medically improbable. Pregnant. Yes. As in, baby pregnant? Is there another kind? Amaka set down her spoon with exaggerated care. Who? Jean Hyeryong. The silence that followed was the loudest silence Alachukwu had ever experienced. Amaka stared at her. Blinked. Stared some more. Then she leaned back in her chair, pressed both hands against her face, and made a sound that was somewhere between a scream and a prayer. The Mafia man? Amaka whisper shouted through her fingers. The Korean Mafia man? The one they call the dragon? That Jean Hyeryong. Yes. Alachukwu Kayamaka Nwafer. Are you telling me that you are carrying the child of the most dangerous man in South Korea? Alachukwu paused. Children, actually. Amaka's hands dropped from her face. What do you mean, children? Quintuplets. 5 babies. 3 boys, 2 girls. For 3 full seconds, Amaka Ude was completely speechless. This had never happened before in her entire life. Her mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. She looked like a fish that had been plucked from the ocean and placed in a boardroom. Then she exploded. 5. She grabbed the edge of the table. 5 babies? You, one woman, are carrying 5 of that man's children? How is that even possible? Is he, Alachukwu, what kind of man? Amaka, lower your voice. Lower my voice? You just told me you're having quintuplets with the Dragon of Seoul and you want me to lower my voice. The entire cafe turned to stare. Sit down, Alachukwu hissed. Amaka realized she had stood up at some point. She sat down. Then she stood up again. Then she sat down. She picked up her cheesecake fork, put it down, picked up her coffee, set it down, and finally clasped her hands together as if praying. God is testing me, she muttered. I said, Lord, give me an exciting life, and he said, here, your best friend is pregnant with 5 Mafia babies. They're not Mafia babies. Their father is a mafia boss. They are mafia babies. They will come out of the womb negotiating territory. Despite everything, Alachukwu laughed. It was the first real laugh she'd had in weeks, and it felt like rain after a drought. Amaka's expression softened. She reached across the table and took her friend's hands. Olu. My sister. My person. Her voice dropped to its gentlest register. Are you okay? Truly. Alachukwu's eyes glistened. I'm terrified. I'm alone in a foreign country. I'm carrying 5 babies by a man who has enemies who would kill to hurt him. My mother doesn't know. My body is already changing in ways that frighten me. And the doctor says this pregnancy will be the most difficult thing I've ever experienced. A tear slipped down her cheek. Amaka squeezed her hands. You are not alone. You hear me? You have never been alone since the day I met you in that Lagos hospital and you shared your lunch with me even though you only had 1 yam. You are not alone and you will never be alone. I am here. I will be here for every ultrasound, every craving, every swollen ankle and every emotional breakdown. That is a covenant, not a promise. Alachukwu wiped her eyes. What about the mafia part? I will deal with the mafia part the same way I deal with everything. Aggressively and with excellent shoes. She paused. But Olu, does he love you? This dragon man. Does he actually love you? Alachukwu thought about Jin's hand trembling on hers during the ultrasound. About the way he had said 5, as if the word contained the entire weight of his future. About his vow to protect her, spoken with a conviction that went beyond obligation into something rawer and more honest. I think he's trying to figure out what love means, she said. I think nobody ever taught him. Then you teach him. But if he hurts you, if he so much as makes you cry 1 tear that isn't happy, I will fly back to Nigeria, consult with my grandmother's spirit, and bring down a curse so powerful that his dragon tattoo will crawl off his neck and bite him. Alachukwu laughed through her tears. I love you, Amaka. Of course you do. I'm magnificent. She squeezed her friend's hands one more time. Now drink your ginger tea before those 5 Nigerian Korean babies stage a coup in your stomach. The weeks that followed were a study in controlled chaos. Jean transformed the top 3 floors of an exclusive residential tower in Hanamdong into a private living compound for Alachukwu. The apartment was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River, heated floors, a private garden terrace, and a kitchen stocked with both Korean and Nigerian ingredients that were flown in weekly from Lagos. It also had a state-of-the-art medical monitoring room, a 24-hour private nurse on rotation, and a security system that could detect an unauthorized heartbeat within a 100-meter radius. This is too much, Alachukwu said, standing in the living room, her hand resting on her belly, which had already begun to show the faintest curve. It's not enough, Jean replied. He visited every evening. Without fail. Regardless of what the day had demanded, regardless of meetings, negotiations, threats, or the constant pressure of holding a criminal empire together while simultaneously trying to step back from it. He came to her. He sat beside her. He asked about her day, about the babies, about how she was feeling. Sometimes they talked for hours. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, watching the river lights through the windows, her head against his shoulder, his hand resting on the gentle swell of her abdomen where 5 lives grew. He was learning. Slowly, awkwardly, with the determined concentration of a man who had mastered every skill he'd ever attempted but now faced something that could not be mastered, only experienced. He read books on pregnancy, medical journals, parenting guides. He highlighted passages. He asked Dr. Park questions that revealed he had been studying with obsessive thoroughness. You're reading What to Expect When You're Expecting? Alachukwu said one evening, spotting the book on his nightstand with approximately 40 color-coded sticky notes protruding from its pages. Research. You've color-coded it. Efficient research. She pulled the book from the nightstand and flipped through it. Green tabs for nutrition. Yellow for development milestones. Red for complications. Blue for... She looked up at him. Emotional bonding. He took the book from her hands without meeting her eyes. Comprehensive research. She smiled. It was the kind of smile that carried more love than words ever could. But beneath the warmth of their growing bond, danger was circling. Cha Dong-hwan had ears everywhere. Informants embedded in hospitals, police departments, and even within the lower ranks of the Dragon Crest syndicate itself. It was one of these informants, a maintenance worker at the Hanul Medical Center who had noticed the extraordinary security measures taken during a certain obstetric appointment, who first brought the whisper to Cha's attention. Jin Hye-ryong. A woman. A pregnancy. Cha sat in his office in a high-rise overlooking the Busan waterfront, tapping his fingers against his desk with the rhythmic patience of a man who understood that the most effective weapons were not bullets but information. Find out everything, he told his intelligence chief. The woman's name. Her nationality. Where she lives. How far along the pregnancy is. And most importantly, how much she means to him. The intelligence chief nodded and disappeared. Cha leaned back in his chair and smiled. It was a smile that contained no warmth. No joy. Only the cold satisfaction of a predator who had just discovered that the most dangerous animal in the forest had finally made a mistake. The dragon had a weakness. And weaknesses in Cha Donghwan's world existed to be exploited. At 12 weeks the babies were growing beautifully. Dr. Park's weekly ultrasounds showed 5 strong heartbeats, 5 developing spines, 5 tiny sets of forming fingers. Alachukwa's body was expanding faster than a typical pregnancy, which was expected with quintuplets but still alarming. You need to reduce your stress, Dr. Park told her during a checkup. Your blood pressure is slightly elevated. Not dangerous yet, but quintuplet pregnancies can deteriorate quickly. Alachukwu nodded. She didn't mention the nightmares. The ones where shadowy figures surrounded her apartment. Where she ran through endless hospital corridors carrying babies she couldn't hold on to. Where Jin's voice called to her from somewhere she couldn't reach. She didn't mention them because she was a woman who had been raised to carry burdens silently, to keep moving, to protect others before herself. It was the quality that made her an extraordinary nurse and a maddening patient. But Jin noticed. He noticed the circles under her eyes. The way her laugh had become slightly thinner, like fabric stretched too tight. The way she unconsciously placed both hands over her belly whenever a loud noise startled her, as if shielding the babies from the world with nothing but her palms. You're not sleeping, he said one night, standing in the doorway of her bedroom. I'm fine. That's not what I asked. She looked at him, this tall, powerful man silhouetted in the doorway, his steel-gray eyes soft with concern that he still didn't know how to fully express. The edge of his neck tattoo peeked above the collar of his black shirt. His sleeves were rolled to his forearms, revealing the intricate prayer beads inked around his wrists. I have dreams, she admitted. Bad ones. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of her bed. Without a word, he reached for her hand. He gave it to him. His thumb traced slow circles against her knuckles. Tell me, he said. I dream that someone takes the babies. That I can't protect them. That I wake up and they're gone. His grip tightened. Something dark and fierce crossed his expression. Not anger at her, but at the mere concept that anyone or anything could threaten what she carried. Nobody will take them, he said, his voice low and absolute. Nobody will touch you. Nobody will come within a mile of this building without my knowledge. I have 38 trained operatives rotating security around this tower. I have surveillance on every road, every entrance, every rooftop with a line of sight. The safest place in South Korea right now is wherever you are standing. Jin, that's the problem. You can't control everything. You can't guard against everything. Life isn't a military operation. Watch me. She almost smiled. Almost. What scares me isn't the enemies I can see. It's the ones I can't. He was quiet for a moment. Then he did something that surprised them both. He shifted onto the bed, leaned against the headboard beside her and put his arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him. He was warm. Thought. Present. When I was 8 years old, he said, my father took me to a mountain temple in Gangwon province. There was a monk there, an old man with no teeth and hands like tree bark. He told me a story about a dragon who spent 1,000 years guarding a pearl. The dragon was the strongest creature in the sky, but the pearl was fragile. Just glass and light. The dragon knew that if the pearl shattered, nothing else would matter. Not his fire, not his wings, not his kingdom. So he held it close. Not with his claws, because claws would crush it. With his breath. He breathed warmth around it forever. He looked down at her. You're not a pearl, Alachukwu. You're stronger than anything I've ever tried to protect. But these babies, our babies, they're as fragile as light. And I will breathe warmth around them until there's no breath left in me. She pressed her face into his chest. Her tears soaked through his shirt to his skin, and he held her there, unmoving, until her breathing steadied and the nightmares receded and she fell asleep against the heartbeat of the most dangerous man she had ever known. He didn't sleep. He stayed awake all night, one arm around her, the other hand resting on the curve of her belly where 5 futures grew. The dragon of Seoul keeping watch. It was 16 weeks into the pregnancy when the first direct threat materialized. Sukmin burst into Jin's office without knocking, something he had done exactly twice in 12 years. Both previous times had involved imminent attempts on Jin's life. We have a problem. Jin looked up from his desk, where he had been reviewing security protocols for the hospital where Alachukwa's next ultrasound was scheduled. Talk. Cha Donghwan knows about the woman. He knows about the pregnancy. We don't know how, but one of his operatives was photographed outside the Hanamdong Tower yesterday morning. The same operative was seen near the hospital 2 days before that. Jin's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the temperature of the room. A cold front moving through. The ambient noise of the city outside seemed to dim, as if Seoul itself was holding its breath. How close did they get? The operative maintained a distance of approximately 200 meters. Surveillance only. No approach. 200 meters from Alachukwu. Yes, sir. Jin stood up slowly. He buttoned his jacket. He straightened his cuffs. The movements were deliberate, controlled, precise. The rituals of a man preparing not for violence but for the decision to authorize it. I want the operative identified, located and brought to me within 12 hours. I want every asset we have in Busan activated. I want Cha Donghwan's entire communication network mapped by morning. And I want a secondary safe house prepared for Alachukwu. Somewhere Cha doesn't know exists. Somewhere no one knows exists. Understood. Sukmin. Sir. Jin's steel-gray eyes locked onto his lieutenants with an intensity that could have cut glass. If anyone from Cha's organization gets within 100 meters of that building again, they don't go home. They don't go to a hospital. They don't go anywhere. Do I make myself clear? Sukmin nodded once. He understood. He had always understood. That was why he was still alive and still trusted after 12 years. He turned to leave but stopped at the door. Sir, there's one more thing. What? Cha knows it's quintuplets. Someone inside our medical circle is talking. The room went very, very still. Jin's hands resting on his desk, curled into fists. Loyalty. The knuckles whitened. The tendons in his forearms stood out beneath the ink of mountains and tigers and prayer beads. Find the leak, he said quietly. And bring them to me before you bring them to anyone else. Sukmin left without another word. Jin stood alone in his office. The Seoul skyline burned through the floor-to-ceiling windows, glittering, indifferent, beautiful. Somewhere out there, a man with no conscience was planning to use 5 unborn children as leverage against their father. Jin pulled out his phone and called Alachukwu. She answered on the second ring. Hey, I was just about to eat. Your chef made me pepper soup and I'm trying to convince myself that the portion is too big. Is it? Absolutely not. I'm eating all of it. These babies demand respect. He almost smiled. That small fracture of light that only she could produce. Alachukwu, listen to me carefully. You're going to notice some changes in the security around your building. More personnel. More vehicles. It's precautionary. I need you to trust me and not ask questions right now. Silence on the other end. Then, Jean, what's happening? I'm handling it. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you right now. More silence. He could hear her breathing. He could imagine her standing in the kitchen, one hand on her growing belly, her amber-brown eyes fierce with the intelligence and courage that had drawn him to her in the first place. Okay, she said finally. I trust you. But Jean, whatever you're handling, whatever war you're fighting, remember what Dr. Park said. These babies need peace. I need peace. Don't bring your battlefield to our door. I won't. I promise. And Jean. Yes. Be careful. I need you to come home. The word home. She had said it so naturally, so effortlessly, as if home were not a place but a person. As if wherever he was and wherever she was, the space between them was home. He closed his eyes. I'll come home. He hung up. He stood motionless for a long moment. Then he opened a locked drawer in his desk, removed a burnished steel handgun, checked the magazine and placed it inside his jacket. The Dragon of Seoul had been patient long enough. Now it was time to breathe fire. But before he could move against Cha Dong-hwan, before he could neutralize the threat and secure his family's safety, something happened that neither strategy nor firepower could address. Something medical. Something terrifying. At 18 weeks, Alachukwu collapsed. She was in the kitchen of the Hanam-dong apartment, reaching for a glass from the upper cabinet, when a searing pain tore through her abdomen like a blade of white heat. She gasped, doubled over, and her knees buckled. The glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Her vision tunneled. The room spun. She sank to the ground, both hands clutching her belly, and screamed. The private nurse stationed in the apartment was at her side in 9 seconds. The emergency medical team from the building's ground floor clinic arrived in under 3 minutes. By the time Jin's phone rang, Sukmin's voice, clipped and urgent, "Sir, it's the hospital, it's Alachukwu." She was already being loaded into an armored ambulance. Jin was across the city in a meeting with shipping contractors when the call came. He left mid-sentence. Didn't explain. Didn't apologize. Simply stood up and walked out, his face a mask of controlled terror that made every man in the room instinctively move away from the door. His convoy broke every traffic law in Seoul. Red lights meant nothing. Speed limits meant nothing. The 80-minute drive took 7 minutes. When the SUVs screeched to a halt outside the hospital, Jean was out of the vehicle before it fully stopped, moving through the entrance with the focused velocity of a missile. He found Dr. Park outside the emergency examination room, her face grave. "What happened?" His voice was a blade. "Cervical incompetence," Dr. Park said. "The weight of 5 babies is putting extraordinary pressure on her cervix. It's beginning to thin. If we don't intervene, she could go into preterm labor. At 18 weeks? At 18 weeks, the babies would not survive." The words hit him like a physical blow. He actually staggered. 1 step backward. His hand shot out and gripped the doorframe. The world narrowed to a single point of white-hot clarity. "What do you need?" His voice was barely audible. "We need to perform an emergency circlage, a surgical procedure to stitch the cervix closed. It will buy us time. But she needs complete bed rest afterward. Absolute bed rest. No stress. No movement beyond basic needs. The goal is to keep those babies inside her as long as possible. Every additional week of gestation dramatically increases their chances of survival. Do it. Do it now. Whatever you need. Whatever it costs." "Mr. Jean." Dr. Park placed a hand on his arm. It was the first time she had ever touched him. "She's frightened. She needs you calm. Can you do that?" He looked at the doctor. Behind his steel-gray eyes, a war was being fought. The dragon against the man, fear against control, the instinct to destroy against the need to comfort. The man won. "Yes," he said. "I can do that." He walked into the examination room. Alachukwu was lying on the bed, her face streaked with tears, her hands gripping the rails. Monitor leads trailed from her belly to a machine that displayed 5 frantic heartbeats. All rapid, all stressed, but all present. All alive. When she saw him, a sob broke from her chest. "Jean, I'm sorry, I was just reaching for a glass, I didn't." He was beside her in 2 strides. He took her face in both hands. Loyalty against her left cheek. Honor against her right. "Listen to me," he said. His voice was steady. Warm. The voice of a man who had extinguished his own terror and replaced it with something stronger. "You have nothing to apologize for. This is not your fault. Dr. Park is going to take care of you. She is the best in the world. And those 5 babies in there." He moved one hand to her belly. "They are fighters. They have their mother's strength. They are not going anywhere. What if? No. No, what if? Not today. Today you let the doctors do their work and you hold my hand and you breathe. Just breathe." She grabbed his hand and held it against her chest. Her heart was pounding so hard he could feel it through her skin. "Don't leave," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere. Promise me." "I promise. I'm right here. I'm not leaving this room." The surgery took 45 minutes. Jean stood outside the operating room the entire time, his back against the wall, his eyes closed, his fists clenched at his sides. Sukmin stood guard at the end of the corridor, turning away anyone who approached. 3 times Jin's phone buzzed with syndicate emergencies. 3 times he ignored it. When Dr. Park emerged, pulling off her surgical gloves, Jin pushed off the wall so quickly that the 2 security guards flanking the corridor reached for their weapons instinctively. The circlage was successful, Dr. Park said. All 5 heartbeats are stable. The babies are fine. She's fine. Jin's knees almost buckled. He caught himself. Drew a breath that shook despite every effort to control it. But, Dr. Park continued, and that single word fell like a hammer. She must remain on strict bed rest for the remainder of the pregnancy. Any significant physical activity, any stress, any elevation in blood pressure could compromise the circlage. We are in a race against time, Mr. Jin. The earliest these babies can be delivered with a reasonable chance of survival is 32 weeks. We are at 18. That's 14 weeks of absolute vigilance. She'll have everything she needs. I'll make sure of it. She'll also need you. Dr. Park looked at him directly. Not your money. Not your security. Her. She needs your presence, your patience, and your reassurance. Bed rest is psychologically brutal, especially for a woman as active and independent as Alachukwu. She will need a partner, not a protector. The distinction landed precisely where Dr. Park intended it. Jin nodded slowly. He walked into the recovery room. Alachukwu was awake, groggy from anesthesia, her amber-brown eyes glassy but open. Her long natural curls were spread across the pillow like dark rivers. He sat beside her and took her hand without speaking. Still here, she murmured. Still here. Told you. These babies. Stubborn like their father. The corner of his mouth twitched. They're stubborn like their mother. She smiled weakly. Then her eyes fluttered closed and she slept. Jean held her hand and watched the monitor where 5 heartbeats pulsed in steady, beautiful rhythm. 5 tiny drums. 5 little warriors. Holding on. And outside, in the shadows that stretched between hospital walls and city streets, between power and vulnerability, between the empire he had built and the family he was beginning to choose, the threat of Cha Dong-hwan grew darker with every passing hour. The dragon's weakness had been confirmed. And the serpent was preparing to strike. The weeks following the emergency circlage became a delicate choreography of hope and fear. Alachukwu was transferred from the hospital back to the Hanamdong apartment, but everything had changed. The beautiful space that had once felt like a gift now felt like a gilded cage. She was confined to bed, allowed only brief walks to the bathroom and back, her world shrinking to the dimensions of a single room while 5 lives grew inside her. Jean restructured his entire existence around her. He moved into the apartment permanently, converting one of the spare rooms into a mobile command center where he could conduct syndicate business without leaving her side. Screens glowed through the night. Encrypted calls came and went at all hours. But whenever she woke, whenever she needed anything, he was there. Sitting beside her bed. Reading reports with one hand. Holding hers with the other. You don't have to stay here every minute, she said one afternoon, propped against a mountain of pillows, her belly now visibly round beneath her soft cotton dress. You have an empire to run. The empire can wait. Jean. Alachukwu. She gave him the look, the one that had made him feel truly seen from the moment they met. You're going to exhaust yourself. You're not sleeping. I can see it in your eyes. The shadows are getting darker every day. I'll sleep when they're born. That's not how human biology works. I've never been particularly good at following biological rules. She reached for his hand and pulled it to her belly. Beneath his palm something moved. A flutter. Ick. One of the babies stretching against the confines of their shared space. Jean went completely still. Was that? That was your son, Alachukwu said. Or one of your daughters. They're getting stronger. They want to meet their father. He stared at his hand, at the loyalty inked across his knuckles, at the gentle curve of her belly beneath it. The flutter came again. Stronger this time. A tiny fist or foot pressing against his palm as if to say, I'm here. I'm real. I'm waiting. Something broke inside him. Not shattered, broke open. Like a seed splitting so the plant inside can finally grow toward light. He leaned forward and pressed his forehead against her belly. His eyes closed. His breath shuddered once, twice, then steadied. I'm here, he whispered to the 5 lives growing beneath her skin. I'm right here. And I'm not going anywhere. Alachukwu ran her fingers through his hair. Jet black, usually so perfectly controlled, now slightly disheveled from days of vigil. She felt his shoulders shake once. Silently. Briefly. Then he straightened, his steel-gray eyes bright with something that looked almost like tears but would never fall. They already love you, she said softly. They can feel you. They know your voice. How do you know? Because they kick harder when you're talking. They recognize their father. He looked at her with an expression that defied every reputation he had built. Vulnerable. Terrified and hopeful in equal measure. I don't know how to do this, he said. Neither do I. But we'll learn together. He kissed her then. Gently. Reverently. As if she were something precious and he was a man who had just discovered that the most valuable things in the world couldn't be bought, couldn't be conquered, could only be given freely by someone who chose to give them. When he pulled back, her amber brown eyes were wet. I love you, she said. The words fell between them like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. He was silent for a long moment. Not because he didn't feel it, but because he had spent 38 years learning that love was a vulnerability, a weakness, a door through which enemies could enter. He had spent his entire adult life walling off that door with iron and concrete and the cold calculus of survival. But now the wall was down. And she was standing on the other side. I love you, he said. The words felt foreign in his mouth, like a language he was speaking for the first time. But they were true. Truer than anything he had ever said. She smiled through her tears. Took you long enough. I'm a slow learner. You highlighted an entire pregnancy book with color-coded tabs. You're not a slow learner. You're a coward who's finally getting brave. He almost laughed. Almost. Is that how you see me? Brave. I see a man who built his whole life around never needing anyone. And then he met a woman from Nigeria who didn't care about his empire or his power or his reputation, and instead of running away he stayed. That's the bravest thing I've ever seen. The monitor beside her bed beeped softly, tracking 5 tiny heartbeats. Outside the window, Seoul sparkled in the fading light. And in the space between them something permanent was taking root. But the peace couldn't last. It never does. 3 days later, Sukmin arrived at the apartment with news that turned the fragile hope to ice. Cha is moving, he said, standing in Jin's makeshift command center, his voice low enough that Alachukwu wouldn't hear from the bedroom down the hall. He's mobilized 30 operatives. They've taken positions around the city. Our surveillance picked up encrypted communications referencing the package and extraction timeline. Jin's expression didn't change. But his hands, clasped behind his back, tightened until his knuckles went white. He's planning to take her. That's our assessment. He believes that if he has her and the babies, he can force you to surrender territory, assets, maybe the entire syndicate. When? We don't know. The communications are fragmented. Could be days. Could be hours. Jin turned to face the window. His reflection stared back at him. A man in a tailored black shirt, the edge of his neck tattoo visible above the collar, his jaw set like stone. Move her. Sir. The secondary safe house I ordered prepared. It's ready. Yes. A private estate on Jeju Island. Completely off the grid. No digital footprint. No connections to any syndicate-owned property. Even I don't know the full location. I gave the coordinates to 3 separate teams, each holding one piece. Good. She goes tonight. Full medical team. Full security complement. Dr. Park accompanies her. No one outside this room knows the destination. What about you? Jean turned from the window. His steel-gray eyes held a cold, ancient fire, the kind of flame that burns at the center of the earth, patient and relentless. I stay here. Cha thinks she's in this apartment. Let him think it. Let him come for her and find me instead. Sir, with respect, that's suicide. 30 operatives against 1 man. I won't be alone. Pull the Ghost Division. Every operative. I want them here within 2 hours. The Ghost Division was the most elite unit within the Dragon Crest Syndicate. A team of former Special Forces operatives and intelligence agents who had traded military service for far more lucrative employment. They were the best of the best. The ones Jean deployed when failure was not an option. Sukmin nodded slowly. And after? Once we've dealt with Cha's assault, then I end this. Permanently. I've been patient long enough. I've tried to step back to reduce my involvement, to find some balance between the life I chose and the life I want. But Cha has made that impossible. He's threatened my children. My unborn children. Jin's voice dropped to something barely above a whisper, but the threat in it filled the room like smoke. There is no coming back from that. He dies or I do. There's no third option. When do we move on him? After the babies are born. After Alachukwu is safe and recovered. I won't fight a war while she's pregnant. But the moment those 5 children take their first breath, Cha Donghwan takes his last. Understood. Sukmin hesitated at the door. In 12 years he had followed Jin through countless battles, seen him face death with cold indifference, watched him make decisions that destroyed men and built empires. But he had never seen what he saw now. He had never seen Jin Haeryong afraid. Not of dying. Not of fighting. But of losing something he couldn't replace. Sir, Sukmin said quietly. For what it's worth, she's good for you. They all are. The syndicate, the power, the territory will fight for it because that's what we do. But this. He gestured vaguely toward the bedroom where Alachukwu rested. This is different. This is worth fighting for. Jin didn't respond. But something in his expression softened just for a moment before the steel returned. Get her out safely. That's all that matters tonight. Sukmin bowed slightly and left. Jin stood alone in the command center, surrounded by screens and encrypted communications and the apparatus of an empire he had spent his life building. And for the first time he understood what his father must have felt in those final moments in that warehouse in Incheon. The crushing weight of knowing that all the power in the world couldn't protect everything you loved. But unlike his father, Jin would not be caught off guard. The dragon was awake. And the dragon was ready. Moving Alachukwu was a delicate operation. At 22 weeks pregnant with quintuplets, she couldn't simply be loaded into a vehicle and driven away. Her condition required specialized medical transport, constant monitoring and staff prepared for any emergency. Dr. Park coordinated with the private medical team, ensuring that every contingency was covered. The departure happened at 3 in the morning. Jin woke her gently, sitting on the edge of her bed, his hand on her cheek. We need to go, he said. Her eyes opened slowly, clouded with sleep. What's happening? I'm moving you somewhere safer. A place where no one can find you. Dr. Park is coming with you. Everything you need will be there. She came awake faster, the fog clearing from her amber-brown eyes. Jin, what aren't you telling me? He hesitated, then decided she deserved the truth. Cha Donghwan knows about you. About the babies. He's planning something and I can't risk you being here when it happens. You need to be somewhere he can't reach. And what about you? I'll stay here. Make sure he thinks you're still in the apartment. Draw his attention away from wherever you're going. You mean use yourself as bait? I mean protect you. Whatever that takes. She sat up despite his protest, one hand on her belly. Jin Haeryong, you are not sacrificing yourself for me. Do you understand? Those babies need a father. I need, her voice caught. I need you to come back. He took both her hands. The tattoos on his knuckles pressed against her palms. I will come back. I promise. But I can't protect you if I'm worried about you being in the crossfire. I need you safe. I need to know that whatever happens here, you and the babies are untouchable. Can you give me that? Can you trust me that much? She stared at him for a long moment. Then she pulled his hands to her lips and kissed his knuckles. First the loyalty. Then the honor. Come back to us, she whispered against his skin. That's not a request. That's a command. Yes, ma'am. She almost smiled. Then her expression grew serious again. And when you do come back, and you will, we're going to talk about how you make decisions without consulting me. This whole, I'm the dragon so I decide everything approach is going to need some adjustment. Noted. I'm serious, Jean. Marriage means partnership. And we are getting married. I decided that just now. His eyebrows rose. You decided. Yes. Someone has to make decisions around here. You take too long. Despite everything, the threat, the fear, the midnight operation underway, Jean felt the corner of his mouth twitch. That familiar fracture of light she always managed to find. I'll put it on the calendar, he said. You do that. The medical transport arrived 15 minutes later. Alachukwu was carefully moved onto a specialized stretcher that monitored her vitals continuously. Dr. Park supervised every step, her face tight with professional concentration. 4 armored vehicles surrounded the medical transport, their occupants invisible behind tinted windows. Jean walked beside the stretcher as it moved toward the elevator. Jeju Island, he said quietly. A private estate on the southern coast. Sukmin's team will guard the perimeter. Dr. Park and the medical staff will be with you around the clock. Everything you need is already there. Amaka. I'm sending for her. She'll arrive tomorrow morning. Alachukwu's eyes glistened. Thank you. Thank me when this is over. They reached the elevator. The doors opened. The stretcher began to roll forward. Jean. He stopped. Looked down at her. I love you, she said. Don't forget that when you're doing whatever dangerous thing you're planning. Don't forget that you have something worth living for. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. His lips lingered there for a breath longer than necessary. I won't forget, he murmured against her skin. I couldn't forget if I tried. The elevator doors closed. She was gone. Jean stood alone in the corridor, the silence pressing against him from all sides. Then he turned, walked back to the apartment and began preparing for war. The Ghost Division arrived within 2 hours as ordered. 18 operatives, each one selected for their specific skills. Snipers, demolitions experts, close-quarters combat specialists, tech operators who could hack any system and disable any security protocol. They moved through the building like shadows, taking positions, setting up surveillance, preparing for an assault that they knew was coming. Jean briefed them personally. Cha Donghuan has approximately 30 operatives in the city. Our intelligence suggests they're planning an extraction. They believe my pregnant partner is still in this apartment. As of 30 minutes ago, she was moved to a secure location. Cha's team doesn't know that. Their assault will happen tonight or tomorrow. When it does, I want no survivors. The operatives didn't flinch. They had all done worse things for less personal reasons. Rules of engagement, Jean continued. Anyone who breaches this building dies. Anyone who attempts to contact Cha with information dies. We are not taking prisoners. We are sending a message. The Dragon Crest Syndicate does not negotiate, does not compromise, and does not forgive threats against family. Is that clear? 18 voices responded in unison. Yes, sir. Good. Take your positions. Rest in shifts. Stay sharp. They'll come when they think we're not expecting it. The operatives dispersed. Sukmin remained. Sir, you should rest as well. I'll rest when she's safe. She is safe. She's probably landing in Jeju as we speak. She's not safe until Cha is dead. Sukmin didn't argue. He knew when his boss had moved beyond reasoning. I'll be on the command floor if you need me. Jean nodded. When Sukmin left, he walked to the window and looked out at the city. Seoul glittered beneath him, indifferent to the violence about to erupt in its heart. His phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Park. Asterisk arrived safely. Patient stable. 5 heartbeats strong. Will update in 4 hours. Asterisk. He closed his eyes and let the words wash over him like water over stone. 5 heartbeats strong. 5 reasons to end this war. 5 reasons to make sure Cha Donghuan never threatened anyone again. The attack came at 4:47 a.m. Jean was in the command center when the perimeter alarms triggered. Screens lit up with motion alerts from the building's exterior. Cameras showed dark figures scaling the emergency stairwells, moving through maintenance corridors, approaching from multiple angles simultaneously. 32 operatives. More than their intelligence had suggested. Cha had held some in reserve. Jean spoke into his comm unit. Ghost team weapons free. Engage all hostiles. No one reaches the penthouse level. The building erupted into controlled chaos. The Ghost Division had prepared for exactly this scenario. Every hallway had been mapped. Every blind spot eliminated. Every choke point fortified. Cha's operatives were good, former military, well-trained, equipped with the best weapons money could buy, but they were walking into a trap designed by a man who had been planning warfare since before most of them were born. The fighting lasted 17 minutes. Jean monitored it from the command center, issuing occasional orders, adjusting tactics as needed, but mostly watching his team work with the efficiency of a precision instrument. Room by room, floor by floor, Cha's assault force was dismantled. When the last operative fell, a young man barely out of his 20s who had made the mistake of entering through the roof, the building went quiet. Jean walked through the aftermath personally. 32 bodies, scattered across 11 floors. Not a single member of the Ghost Division was dead, though 3 had sustained injuries that would require medical attention. A decisive victory. But Jin's expression held no triumph. This was just the beginning. He stopped beside one of the fallen operatives, a man with a serpent tattoo on his neck, the symbol of Cha's organization. Jean crouched down and studied the dead face. "You came for my family," he said quietly, though no one was there to hear. "You came for my children. And you failed. Now your boss will pay for sending you." He stood and pulled out his phone. "Sukmin, clean this up. I want our legal teams engaged by morning. Police reports, media management, everything clean." Officially, this was a break-in by unknown assailants, repelled by private security. "Understood, sir. And Cha? I'm going to deal with Cha personally. But not yet. Not until the babies are born. I made a promise." "Yes, sir." Jean ended the call and walked to the window. Dawn was beginning to break over Seoul, painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. Somewhere out there, Cha Dong-hwan was learning that his assault had failed. He would be frightened now. Cornered animals were the most dangerous. But Jean was patient. He could wait. For 4 months he could wait. And then the dragon would feast. The weeks that followed were tense but quiet. Cha Dong-hwan retreated to his Busan stronghold, surrounded by guards, unwilling to make another move while Jin's counterattack capabilities remained unknown. It was a cold war now, both sides watching, waiting, preparing for a final confrontation that everyone knew was coming. On Jeju Island, Olachuku grew. The estate was beautiful, a modern villa overlooking cliffs that dropped into a turquoise sea. The air smelled of salt and hibiscus. The gardens were filled with flowers that bloomed in defiance of the coming winter. And the quiet was so complete that sometimes Olachuku could hear her own heartbeat, layered beneath 5 others. Jean visited when he could, flying in on a private helicopter that landed in the estate's rear garden. Each visit was a careful operation. Security checks, surveillance sweeps, protocols designed to ensure that no one followed him, no one knew where he was going. But when he arrived, he left the dragon at the door. He would find her on the terrace, wrapped in blankets despite the mild weather, her belly now enormous with the weight of 5 children. He would sit beside her. Take her hand. Ask about her day. Listen to her describe the kicks, the movements, the way the baby seemed to have developed a rotation schedule. 3 awake, 2 sleeping, then switching. "They're organizing already," she said one afternoon 26 weeks into the pregnancy. "I think one of them is going to be a manager. Very bossy. Kicks the others when they move too much. Must get that from you." "Excuse me. The bossiness." She threw a grape at his head. He caught it with one hand and ate it, the ghost of a smile on his lips. These moments became his lifeline. In Seoul he was the dragon, cold, calculating, preparing for a war that would either end Cha Dong-hwan or end him. But on this island, watching the sun set over the ocean with the woman he loved, feeling his children move beneath his palm, he was someone else. Someone he was still learning how to be. Amaka had arrived as promised, bringing with her a suitcase full of Nigerian snacks, 3 new wrappers for Olachuku, and a running commentary on everything she had seen since leaving Lagos. "This estate has a pool," she announced upon arrival. "An indoor pool. And an outdoor pool. 2 pools. Your man has 2 pools. He also has enemies who want to kill him and steal his babies," Olachuku pointed out. "I'm aware. But also, 2 pools." Having Amaka there transformed the isolation of bed rest into something more bearable. The 2 women spent hours talking, laughing, playing cards, watching Nigerian movies on a massive television that seemed designed for a cinema. Amaka told stories about their nursing school days, about patients they had saved, about the time Olachuku had accidentally injected herself with saline solution and fainted in front of a room full of medical students. "You promised never to tell that story again." "I promised under duress. It doesn't count." Jean walked in on one of these conversations and found both women in tears of laughter, Olachuku clutching her belly as she gasped for breath. "Is she all right?" he asked, immediately alarmed. "She's fine," Amaka said, waving him off. She's just learning that her best friend is a merciless historian who never forgets embarrassing details. Jean looked between them, clearly out of his depth. Should I leave? No, Alachukwu said, finally catching her breath. Stay. Sit down. Amaka was just about to tell you about the time I accidentally called our nursing supervisor Mommy during rounds. Alachukwu. What? If I'm being exposed, you're being exposed too. Jean sat down, watching the two women bicker with affectionate ferocity. And for a moment the weight of empires and enemies and the violence still to come lifted from his shoulders. This was what he was fighting for. This laughter. This warmth. This family. He would kill 1,000 men to protect it. At 30 weeks the complications returned. Dr. Park had been monitoring Alachukwu's blood pressure throughout the pregnancy, watching it climb incrementally week by week. At 30 weeks it spiked. Preeclampsia, Dr. Park announced after examining the test results. The babies are putting extraordinary strain on your cardiovascular system. Your blood pressure is dangerously elevated. If it continues to rise, we may need to deliver early. How early? Jean demanded. Within days. Possibly within hours, depending on how she responds to treatment. Alachukwu lay on the bed, both hands on her belly, her face calm despite the fear in her eyes. Are the babies ready? Can they survive at 30 weeks? Survival rates for quintuplets at 30 weeks are approximately 85%, Dr. Park said carefully. They would need extensive NICU care. There would be risks, respiratory issues, developmental challenges, feeding difficulties. But survival is very possible. Then we wait as long as we safely can. I want to give them every possible day. Jean moved to her side. Alachukwu. I'm not being foolish, she said, cutting him off with a look. I know my body. I know these babies. If Dr. Park says we need to deliver, we deliver. But until then I fight for every hour. That's what mothers do. He took her hand. There was nothing he could say. This was a battle he couldn't fight for her. This was a battlefield where all his power was useless. All he could do was be there. The next 72 hours were the longest of Jean Haeryong's life. Medication stabilized Alachukwu's blood pressure. Temporarily. Every 6 hours, Dr. Park checked her vitals, analyzed her blood work, monitored the baby's heartbeats. Every 6 hours they braced for the word that delivery was inevitable. Jean didn't sleep. He sat in a chair beside her bed, holding her hand, watching the monitors, listening to 5 heartbeats that had become the most important sound in his universe. Talk to them, Alachukwu said on the second night, her voice tired but warm. They like your voice. What should I say? Anything. Tell them who you are. Tell them about the world they're coming into. Tell them about us. He shifted closer to her belly, feeling awkward, uncertain, completely out of his element. The Dragon of Seoul, commander of thousands, negotiator with presidents and crime lords, struggling to find words for an audience of 5 unborn children. He began slowly. My name is Jean Haeryong. I'm your father. I'm not sure what kind of father I'll be. I didn't have a good example. My father was away most of my childhood and then he was dead. I've spent most of my life learning how to fight, how to plan, how to control everything around me. I don't know how to hold a baby. I don't know how to change a diaper. I don't know how to do any of the things that fathers are supposed to do. He paused. Alachukwu's hand squeezed his shoulder, encouraging him to continue. But I know this, I love you. All of you. Before you were born, before you even had heartbeats, the idea of you changed something in me. Your mother changed something in me. She taught me that strength isn't about never needing anyone. It's about letting yourself need someone and trusting them not to destroy you for it. He took a breath. His voice had grown rough. I don't know what the world will be like when you enter it. I've made enemies who might come for you. I've done things that would horrify you if you knew them. But I promise you this. I will spend the rest of my life being the kind of man you can be proud of. I will protect you. I will provide for you. And I will love you more than I ever thought I was capable of loving anything. He pressed his forehead against her belly, the way he had done months ago in the apartment, when the first flutter of a kick had cracked his armor wide open. So stay strong in there, he whispered. A little longer. Your mother is fighting for you. Your father is waiting for you. And when you come out, all 5 of you, I'm going to spend every day learning how to be worthy of you. Beneath his forehead, 5 tiny heartbeats pulsed in response. Alachukwu was crying silently above him, her hand in his hair, her heart full to breaking. That, she said softly, was the most beautiful thing you've ever said. I meant every word. I know you did. That's what makes it beautiful. The moment held, suspended in time, a perfect pearl of peace before the storm. At 32 weeks, exactly on target, the babies decided they were done waiting. Alachukwu woke at 3 in the morning with a gasp. The monitors beside her bed erupted in alarms. Dr. Park rushed in, took one look at the readings and made the call. It's time. We're delivering now. The next 2 hours were controlled chaos. The estate had been equipped with a full surgical suite for exactly this possibility. Dr. Park had flown in 2 additional neonatal specialists, each stationed on the island for the past week. NICU equipment had been transported from the mainland and installed in a converted wing of the villa. Jean was not allowed in the operating room. He stood outside the doors, his back against the wall, his hands clasped in front of him. Loyalty. The knuckles were white with tension. His face was expressionless, but anyone who knew him could see the war raging behind his steel-gray eyes. Sukmin stood beside him, silent, waiting. The minutes stretched into eternity. Then, a sound that cut through the silence like a blade of light. A baby crying. Jin's breath caught. Another cry joined the first. Then another. Then another. 4 voices. Tiny, furious, miraculous. Silence. One more beat. 2. Then the 5th. Weaker than the others. But unmistakable. 5 cries. 5 voices. 5 lives entering the world together. Jin's knees buckled. He caught himself against the wall, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Sukmin grabbed his arm to steady him. Sir. I'm fine. His voice was ragged. I'm fine. They're alive. They're all alive. The operating room doors opened. Dr. Park emerged, still in her surgical gown, her face exhausted but triumphant. 5 healthy babies, she announced. 3 boys, 2 girls. All breathing independently. The smallest girl will need additional support, but she's fighting hard. Your partner came through the surgery beautifully. She's asking for you. Jean pushed past her before she finished speaking. Alachukwu was lying on a recovery bed, pale, exhausted, radiant. Her natural black curls were damp with sweat, her amber-brown eyes heavy-lidded but bright. And in her arms, cradled against her chest, was the smallest of their children. A tiny girl, impossibly fragile, wrapped in a pink blanket. Around the room, 4 other bassinets held the remaining babies, each one monitored by medical staff, each one miraculous. Jean stopped at the bedside. His hands were shaking. The feared dragon of Seoul, trembling like a leaf. Come meet your daughter, Alachukwu whispered. He approached as if the baby might shatter at his proximity. Fully, reverently. He looked down at the tiny face, at eyes that weren't yet open, at lips that pursed in sleep, at skin that was a perfect blend of his fairness and her richness. She's so small, he breathed. They all are. But they're strong. They made it to 32 weeks. They fought for every day. Alachukwu smiled weakly. They're fighters. Like their parents. Dr. Park appeared beside him. Would you like to hold one? Jean looked at the doctor as if she had suggested he hold a live grenade. I don't. I've never. First time for everything. Come. This one's been particularly restless. I think he wants his father. She led him to a bassinet where a baby boy lay, his tiny fists waving, his face scrunched in something between outrage and curiosity. Jin's sleeve tattoos were visible beneath his rolled cuffs as he extended his hands. Hands that had signed death warrants, that had held weapons, that had built and destroyed empires. Dr. Park placed the baby in his arms. The world stopped. Jean looked down at his son, this impossible, miraculous creature who carried his blood and Alachukwu's love and the hopes of both their lineages. The baby's eyes blinked open. Unfocused. Searching. Then they seemed to find his face and settle there. Hello, Jean whispered. His voice cracked. I'm your father. The baby yawned. Something inside Jean Haeryong, the last remnant of the wall he had built around his heart, the final fortress against vulnerability, collapsed completely. A tear fell from his steel-gray eyes. Then another. The dragon of Seoul wept openly, holding his son, surrounded by his family, transformed by love into something he had never believed he could be. A father. The days that followed were a blur of feedings, diaper changes and sleepless nights. The babies were named in a ceremony that blended Korean and Nigerian traditions. The 3 boys were called Sungho, Chukwamika and Daeyoung. The 2 girls were named Amara and Jiyeon. Each name was chosen with intention. Korean names honoring Jin's heritage, Igbo names honoring Olachukwa's, all of them meaning something about strength, love and hope. Amaka became an unofficial second mother, handling the babies with the competence of a woman who had delivered hundreds of infants and was not intimidated by 5 at once. "You're spoiling them," Olachukwu said as Amaka rocked Amara and Jiyeon simultaneously. "I'm loving them. There's a difference. Your Mafia husband can provide discipline later. Right now they get cuddles. He's not my husband yet. Please. You're having his 5 children and living in his island fortress. You're his wife in every way except paperwork. The man looks at you like you invented sunshine." Olachukwu laughed. It was the first real full laugh she'd had since the delivery. "He does not. Girl. I've seen that man stare down at diapers like they're battle strategies. I've seen him Google, 'Why do babies cry?' at 3 in the morning. And I've seen him watch you sleep like you're the most precious thing he's ever encountered. If that's not love, I don't know what love is." As if summoned by the conversation, Jin walked in. He was carrying Chukwamika in one arm and a bottle in the other, his tailored shirt rumpled, his usually perfect hair disheveled. "He won't eat," Jin said, frustrated. "I've tried the bottle at 3 different angles. I've warmed the formula. I've checked the temperature. He just stares at me and refuses." Amaka snorted. "Maybe because you're holding him like a business document." "I am not. Give him here." She took the baby, adjusted the hold, tilted the bottle slightly, and within seconds Chukwamika was drinking contentedly. Jin stared. "How did you do that?" "Experience. Instinct. And the understanding that babies are not problems to be solved. They're people to be understood. You'll learn." "Will I?" Olachukwu reached for his hand and pulled him down to sit beside her on the bed. "You will. You're already learning. 2 weeks ago you couldn't hold a baby without looking like you were defusing a bomb. Now you're doing middle-of-the-night feedings and only looking mildly terrified. That's progress. That's enormous progress." He leaned his head back against the headboard and closed his eyes. Exhaustion was written in every line of his face. But beneath the exhaustion was something else. A contentment, a purpose, a peace that he had never expected to find. "I still have unfinished business," he said quietly. "Cha Dong-hwan is still out there. Still a threat. I've been postponing, but I can't postpone forever." Olachukwu's hand tightened on his. "I know. When I deal with him, when this is finally over, I want to be done. With all of it. The syndicate, the territory, the violence. I want to transition everything to Sukmin. Legitimate businesses only. I want to be here. With you. With them." She studied his profile. The sharp jaw, the closed eyes, the dragon tattoo that disappeared beneath his collar. "Can you do that? Walk away from everything you've built. I can do anything for them." He opened his eyes and looked at the bassinets where their children slept. "They changed me, Olachukwu. You changed me. The man I was before wouldn't have believed this was possible. But I'm not that man anymore. Who are you now?" He turned to look at her. His steel-gray eyes, usually so cold, so guarded, were warm with an emotion he was still learning to name. "I'm theirs. Completely. Whatever that requires." She kissed him. Gently. Sweetly. With the kind of tenderness that didn't need passion because it was built on something deeper. "Then end it," she said when they parted. "End it and come home." "I will. Promise me." "I promise." The assault on Cha Dong-hwan's Busan compound happened 3 weeks later. It was not a dramatic confrontation. It was not a cinematic battle with witty exchanges and near-death escapes. It was a surgical strike. Precise, overwhelming, final. Jin had spent months preparing. Every weakness in Cha's security had been mapped. Every loyal guard had been identified and neutralized through bribery, blackmail, or strategic elimination. By the time Jin's forces moved, the compound was a shell defended by a skeleton crew. Jin entered personally. He found Cha in his office, surrounded by the remnants of his empire. Computers smashed, documents burned, the desperate last acts of a man who knew the end had come. "You took your time," Cha said. He was seated behind his desk, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his face calm despite the chaos around him. I expected you months ago. I was busy becoming a father. Ah yes. The quintuplets. 5 targets instead of 1. You've made yourself vulnerable. I've made myself dangerous. There's a difference. Jean stepped closer. His hands hung loose at his sides. Loyalty. The knuckles steady. You threatened my children, he said. You sent men to kidnap a pregnant woman. You tried to use unborn babies as leverage. There is no coming back from that, Cha. No negotiation. No surrender. No mercy. Cha set down his glass. Then do what you came to do, dragon. We both know how this ends. Jean drew his weapon. For my father, he said. For my family. For every life you've destroyed in your miserable existence. The shot echoed once. Then silence. Jean stood over the body of his oldest enemy and felt nothing. No triumph. No satisfaction. Just the hollow recognition that another chapter of violence had closed, and he was free to begin something new. He walked out of the compound without looking back. Sukmin was waiting outside, surrounded by the remnants of their assault force. It's done, Jean said. Sir. What now? Jean looked at the Busan skyline, at the first hints of dawn breaking over the ocean. How I go home. The wedding happened 6 months later. It was held on the grounds of the Jeju estate, in the garden where hibiscus bloomed in defiant reds and pinks. 200 guests attended, a mixture of Olachukwa's family who had flown in from Nigeria, members of Jin's organization who had proven their loyalty, and friends from both worlds who had become family in the chaos of the past year. Olachukwu wore a traditional Korean hanbok in white and gold, with an overlay of Nigerian lace that Amaka had commissioned from a master craftsman in Lagos. Her natural black curls were adorned with flowers. Her amber-brown eyes shone with tears she didn't try to hide. Jean wore a traditional Korean wedding suit, his tattoos covered for once, his jet-black hair perfectly styled. He stood at the altar and watched her walk toward him, and everyone present saw the feared dragon of Seoul cry for the second time in his life. The ceremony blended traditions. Korean bows. Nigerian prayers. Vows spoken in English, repeated in Korean and blessed in Igbo. I was not a man who believed in love, Jean said, his voice rough with emotion. I believed in power. In control. In the cold logic of survival. And then you laughed in a room full of people who feared me, and I understood that I had been wrong about everything. You didn't just teach me to love Olachukwu. You taught me to hope. You taught me that there was a version of myself worth becoming. Whatever I am now, whatever good exists in me, you created it. And I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of what you've given me. Olachukwu smiled through her tears. Jean Haeryong, I never expected to fall in love in a foreign country with a man everyone warned me about. I never expected to become a mother to 5 children who would change every plan I ever made. But life doesn't follow plans. Life follows love. And I love you. Not despite what you were, but because of who you've become. You have shown me that people can change. That redemption is possible. That even the most guarded heart can learn to be open. I am honored to be your wife. I am proud to be the mother of your children. And I cannot wait to see who we become together. The officiant pronounced them married. Jean kissed his wife with a tenderness that made several former crime lords in the audience visibly uncomfortable. The reception lasted until midnight, filled with dancing, feasting, laughter, and the joyful chaos of 5 babies being passed from relative to relative like treasures on display. When it was finally over, Jean and Olachukwu stood on the terrace overlooking the ocean, the sounds of celebration fading behind them. Mrs. Jean, he said, trying the words. My wife. Mr. Noir for Jean, she replied, having insisted that her name be incorporated as well. My husband. Our children are probably destroying the nursery as we speak. Probably. Amaka will handle it. She's terrifying. She's magnificent. He pulled her close, her back against his chest, his arms wrapped around her waist. The moon painted the ocean silver. The stars scattered across the sky like promises. I never thought I'd have this, he said quietly. Any of this. A wife. Children. Peace. And now that you have it? He pressed his lips to her temple. Now I spend every day protecting it. Not with violence. Not with fear. Love. It's taken me 38 years to learn, but I think I finally understand. Understand what? That this is what strength really is. Not the ability to destroy. The courage to build. She turned in his arms and looked up at him. Her amber brown eyes, so warm, so wise, so full of the love that had transformed him. Welcome home, Jin Hae-ryong. He smiled. That rare, beautiful fracture of light. It's good to be home. 3 years later, the Jeju estate was a circus of beautiful chaos. 5 children ran through the gardens, their laughter echoing off the stone walls. Sung-ho, the eldest by 3 minutes, had inherited his father's commanding presence and his mother's warm eyes. Chukwamika was the dreamer, always wandering off to study flowers or chase butterflies. Daeyoung was the prankster, constantly scheming with his sisters. Amara, the fiercer of the girls, had already declared at 3 years old that she would be the boss of everything when she grew up. An Ji-yeon, the smallest, the one who had fought hardest to survive, had become the family's unexpected leader. Quiet, observant, and beloved by all her siblings. They spoke 3 languages fluently, Korean, English, and Igbo, switching between them mid-sentence in ways that left most adults bewildered. Alachukwu watched them from the terrace, her second pregnancy just beginning to show. Twins this time. Because apparently her husband's biology simply did not do anything in moderation. Jean walked up behind her, sliding his arms around her expanding waist. They found the pond, he reported. Daeyoung is already knee-deep in mud. Amar is yelling at him. Jian is taking notes on a leaf for some reason. That's our children. That's our chaos. You love it. He rested his chin on her shoulder, watching their 5 miracles cause havoc in the garden. I love it more than I have words for. The Dragon Crest Syndicate was a memory now. Jean had transitioned all operations to Sukmin over the past 3 years, retaining only ownership of the legitimate businesses. He still consulted occasionally, still received reports. But the violence, the territory disputes, the cold calculus of power, that life was behind him. He was a businessman now. A philanthropist. The founder of a foundation that funded neonatal care in underserved communities across Nigeria and Korea. A father who attended school events and coached mini-football games and read bedtime stories with all the dramatic intensity of a man who had once commanded armies. He was against all odds happy. Alachukwu's mother visited often, having finally forgiven her daughter for marrying a man with too many tattoos and not enough church attendance. She had taught the children to make jollof rice and spoiled them with so many sweets that Jean had been forced to implement a candy rationing system. Amaka had married a Korean chef she had met at a food festival and now ran a fusion restaurant in Seoul that regularly received Michelin consideration. She visited monthly, bringing gifts and gossip and her legendary capacity for making everyone laugh until they cried. Sukmin, now head of the restructured syndicate's legitimate operations, had become an unlikely but devoted uncle to the Quintuplets. He brought them expensive presents and pretended not to notice when they used his security guards as human jungle gyms. The family was whole. The family was safe. The family was everything. On the night of their 3rd wedding anniversary, Jean and Alachukwu sat on the terrace after the children had been put to bed. The stars spread across the sky like a familiar blessing. The ocean whispered against the cliffs below. You know, Alachukwu said, when I came to Korea I thought I'd stay for 2 years. Build my career. Go home. Find a nice Nigerian man. Have a nice, quiet life. And instead, I met a man covered in dragon tattoos who owned a hospital and looked at me like I was the first sunrise he'd ever seen. Jean laughed. Actually laughed. A full, genuine sound that would have stunned anyone who had known him before. I looked at you like that? From the moment we met. You tried to hide it behind all that brooding intensity, but I saw it. A man who was starving for something he didn't know how to ask for. And what was that? She took his hand. Loyalty under her fingertips. Honor against her palm. Connection. Purpose. Someone to show him that all the power in the world is meaningless without love to give it meaning. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. You showed me everything, he said. You gave me everything. These children, this family, this life. None of it would exist without you. I was half a man before you, Alachukwu. A creature of ambition and ice. You made me human. You were always human, Jean. You just needed permission to feel it. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the ocean, feeling the peace that had been so hard-won and was now so precious. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked finally. "Any of it?" He considered the question. The violence he had left behind. The enemies he had destroyed. The empire he had abandoned. The scars, visible and invisible, that he would carry forever. "No," he said. "Every moment of my life, even the darkest ones, led me here. To them. If I had to live it all again, knowing it would bring me to this terrace, watching our children grow, holding your hand in mine, I would do it without hesitation." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I love you, Jin Hae-ryong. I love you, Alachukwun for Jin." The stars wheeled slowly overhead. The ocean sang its eternal song. And somewhere in the house behind them, 5 children dreamed of adventures yet to come, safe in the knowledge that they were loved beyond measure. The dragon had found his pearl. And he would guard it for the rest of his days. 5 years later, when people asked Jin Hae-ryong how a feared mafia boss had ended up with a Nigerian wife and quintuplets who spoke 3 languages and caused chaos wherever they went, he would simply smile. That rare, beautiful smile that his wife had always been able to find in him, and say, "I was lucky enough to be loved by someone who believed I could be better than I was. And I was smart enough not to let her go." His children would roll their eyes. His wife would laugh. And the man who had once been the dragon of Seoul would gather his family close and know, without a shadow of doubt, that he had everything he had ever needed. Everything and so much more. The end.